When fans saw the roadmap for Ironhide Game Studio this year, many of them thought, oh, that's another Vengeance DLC. Every single time there's another content update to Vengeance, I am convinced that it's going to be the last one. Not because Ironhide says anything about it being the last, and given the track record, that shouldn't change things anyways, but because I am hoping for it to be the last. In my review of Vengeance, I said that the game was a lost cause. The wave composition will always be boring. The engine will always have problems, etc. The damage is done. But in that review, I also said that if it wasn't for these problems that can never be fixed, Vengeance could have been the best game in the series by being a live service game. If we could look forward to every update, speculating over which characters and environments would get to appear next, it would give fans a reason to perpetually play or at least return to the game. But that requires a good environment to foster such hype. With all of its fundamental flaws, Vengeance will always have its bad main campaign, bad story, bad spells, some bad expansions, and so on. Hence, I concluded that Vengeance was a lost cause and that Ironhide should focus on doing with Kingdom Rush 5 what they could have done with Vengeance. But Ironhide found a way to have their cake and eat it too.
2 steps ahead. I am always 2 steps ahead.
Being tower defense game designers, I underestimated their ability to find a strategy that works, and their strategy was to add so much content and to give it enough quality that on average, the content in Vengeance would be good. Even if the flaws that I already listed twice for some reason still exist in parts of the game, there's also enough good content with the inclusion of this DLC that I can no longer call Vengeance a mediocre game. Most of my favorite games of all time are objectively flawed. In fact, I think that's true for a lot of people. I don't think Skyrim fans are trying to argue that having over 1,000 bugs in the game gives it more merit. Rather, they accept that and look past it in order to experience one of the best open worlds with the best role-playing options in fantasy gaming. Games can have attributes that are good enough to make them worth playing in spite of their flaws. The Rise of the Pirates DLC is the best expansion in Vengeance by a long shot. Some of you may joke about that not being a significant feat, but Vengeance has some good elite stages. Ranking the expansions, I would put Chris Bargain last because of the wave stat trickle, then Rise of the Dragon because of the Carnival Dragons nonsensically having the immune modifier and the boss being whack, then the Hammerhole DLC for being more quantity over quality. Primal Ravage is the first truly good expansion because it makes the trickling waves actually less boring thanks to the enemies being tough enough. Frozen Nightmare is the most fun, except during Frozen Heart Waves when you have to just watch them waddle with nothing to do unless you have an OP dragon to solo them. The Subaquatic Menace stages are so good that the Revengeance mod doesn't even need to rework some of them. And finally, the Rise of the Pirates is the best expansion we've gotten for the game, but I would still consider Rising Tides and Shadow Moon to be better. What makes this DLC so good is that they make you really think about where to distribute your power at every second of the levels. Deciding which path to invest gold into defending and which ones to invest spells in is a consistently difficult choice, which I think is a characteristic of the best of Kingdom Rush's most difficult stages, like Castle Blackburn and Dusk Chateau. The balance updates they did for the game really get a chance to shine here, because the difference between Shadow Archer's long range and insta-killing, and Boneflinger's shorter range and higher DPS, give the player a tricky balance to strike when countering some of the enemies. Speaking of which, it's insane to me just what they did with the enemies. Every single level introduces so much new content that they could work as standalone stages. In my opinion, the only thing holding the DLC back, besides the fundamental Vengeance flaws, is that some enemies and bosses are more annoying than fun to fight. Sure, it's difficult to have a boss that will instantly win if you mess up your micro against it, but it's definitely not fun to play the entire level again just to get a chance to try something new that still might not work. You have to be in the mood for an extremely punishing challenge and to get the catharsis of winning against those odds in order to enjoy something like this. In a way, that makes sense for a DLC. If you're willing to spend extra money on these games, you're in the same crowd of people who would play Chaos Mode and Impossible Mode. Where I would call Chaos Mode perfect and Rise of the Pirates imperfect is that the fundamental flaws of Vengeance still hinder the game. Tower balance is less bad than before, but the top towers still dominate and become meta to win here. So rather than picking a tower because its particular quirks counter a particular problem in the game, you pick the towers that are statistically the strongest because they are the only things that can counter enemies this hard. Using anything else would result in requiring such perfect micro that it returns to my complaint about painfully running the whole level back just to retry the micro. Depending on how much you weigh these problems, I can understand why someone would conclude that this DLC is still not fun for them. Ironhide did the unthinkable. They made Vengeance good overall. I was so sure that they were wasting their time making more content for this game and should just focus on Alliance. But they proved that you can have your cake and eat it too. They can make Vengeance and Alliance updates without either feeling unwelcome. That being said, I would still vastly prefer updates to the original trilogy over anything else. I can now officially call Vengeance a good game, so mission accomplished. But now that that's done, let's put that effort into the other games to make them even better. I know that most people would prefer an update to Frontiers, mostly because it's their favorite game in the series, but it's because that game is already considered so good that I would argue that an Origins update is the best thing for the community. There are towers in that game that have yet to truly shine in the same way that Arcane Archers, Wild Magus, and Barracks have gotten to. We need an update that lets High Elven Mage and Artillery shine. The Dragon Throne is right there. Imagine the same quantity and quality as Rise of the Pirates, but in a Dragon Throne expansion for Origins. To be fair, if any update is as high quality as Rise of the Pirates, the game it's in shouldn't matter. I can definitely see it being more beneficial for Ironhide to try a Frontiers content update first, to build goodwill of the community. If the community can all trust Ironhide to make good content updates, then the studio can expect more sales for any game's update. That's assuming they do DLCs rather than free expansions. I have a theory that Ironhide is giving Alliance free updates as a means to keep up their reputation as a generous indie studio. Meanwhile, Vengeance is their sandbox to try out things like balance updates and DLCs. Maybe they're testing the waters to gauge the viability of a DLC for the original trilogy. So if such content is really that high quality, I really can't complain about it being paid, as much as we all prefer free stuff. Anyways, there's one more announcement regarding the Kingdom Rush series as a whole. Because it's uncertain how the meta will change as new levels are added to these games, it is impossible to make any list that is as definitive as I had hoped my hero ranking video once was. Truth be told, it's really sad for me to have all that work I put into that video grow increasingly obsolete as Vengeance keeps changing. The whole point of all the time and effort I dedicated to that video was so that I could give something that would unite the community and put everyone on the same page regarding hero information and usefulness analysis. No matter what I say for Vengeance or for Alliance, no matter how useful and informative it may be at the time, it's just going to become outdated. So I want to focus on giving out baseline information about each tower and hero in Alliance and explain how to use them well. I'll still throw them into a ranking because it's conducive to explaining how their traits actually matter in the game, which should also be informative, but I want to stress that I do not want people treating my list like it's gospel. Only once everything's said and done with both games can I hope to make something that definitive. And even then, it's still all just ultimately my opinion. This probably goes without saying, since this community has been trustworthy enough to look at my stuff with skepticism since the very beginning. But I thought I'd put my intentions out in the open so that nobody misinterprets my goals. The rankings are still coming, don't you worry, but give me time to make them actually good and not misinform the community.
You can't rush perfection.
I'm not rushing perfection. I'm rushing you.
Anyways, go give Ironhide all your money. All hair are overlords. Not sponsored. Goodbye.